This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Corenna and Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Corenna Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Now joining us in studio is the CEO of Maine Veterans Homes, Brad Klawitter. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to talk about the great things of Maine Veterans Homes.
That's awesome. Thank you.
For listeners who may not be familiar, what exactly is Maine Veterans Homes and who do you serve?
Maine Veterans Homes was founded in 1977 by the Maine legislature, and part of their reason for the founding was to fulfill the moral obligation the state feels it has to veterans and their families. By doing that, they instituted these 6 homes, which are, if you think about a traditional nursing home, that's what our homes are. They're for veterans. They're for the veteran spouses. They're for Gold Star parents. And if you're not familiar with a Gold Star parent, that's someone who lost their child in combat. So we're open to all of those groups of folks. We have 6 homes in Augusta, Bangor, Caribou, Machias, Scarborough, and South Paris. And what's really interesting is most of those homes are celebrating a significant anniversary. For example, we just celebrated Bangor's 30th anniversary of operations here in this community.
Wow, that's incredible.
30 years.
So when you think about long-term care, there's several different types. You have assisted living, which is folks that are just that. They can do most things by themselves, but there's a few things that they just need a little extra help with, all the way up to skilled care, where you might think of people that are recovering from a stroke or a knee replacement or something like that, where they need that intensive 3+ hours of therapy a day. And then we have traditional residential care services, which is what you think of when you think of long-term and the nursing units. So throw a couple other things in there between a memory care unit and some other types of care that we give. But that's the primary care that we provide to veteran spouses and Gold Star parents.
How many beds do you have overall?
We have about 640 beds throughout the state. We run an average census of about 580 residents between all of those beds. So most of our homes will stay above the 90% occupancy. We had a major dip there for a while, like a lot of long-term care facilities did during the pandemic. But since then, we have shown great growth, getting our census back up to 90% and higher in all of our homes.
What is the criteria to be eligible for Maine Veterans Homes?
The first criteria is that you have to have the medical need to be in a long-term care facility, whatever level of care that is. From there, folks that are eligible are people that have served 1 day of active duty that was not training days. So for example, you go to basic training, then you go to your tech school, or in the Air Force, it was tech school. So you go to your tech school. Those are considered training active duty days. If you separated right after, then that would not make you eligible. However, if you go on to your next duty station and you serve 1 day, you are then eligible for admission at the Maine Veterans Homes. There's a 1-day residency requirement. So if people are moving back and they left Maine and they want to come back, we are able to cut down the amount of time that they have residency here in Maine. And then spouses of veterans, and like I said, the Gold Star parents. Everyone that comes to us has to have an identified payer source. So that's the one thing I want to make sure folks understand. Our payment sources are just like any other long-term care facility, where we get about 55% of it from Medicaid. We have a special section that we get that others don't because we have 70% service-disabled veterans, but we do not receive funding from the state or the VA on a regular and consistent basis. As far as the VA goes, they're more like an insurer to us. If a veteran comes to us, they're 70% service-disabled, they will pay for that veteran's stay instead of the veteran having to pay for that. So we deal with the VA mostly as like a managed care organization.
Interesting. But you're not overseen by the state or the federal government?
Correct. We do have inspections just like all other healthcare organizations. So right now we have both Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, CMS, that do our annual evaluations, as well as the VA comes in and does an annual evaluation as well. I'm very thankful that we've got some legislation federally that it sounds like we're going to be able to cut that down to just one organization because they were looking at the same exact thing. And it was just not a great use of government resources.
So you are the new CEO. You've been there for 10 months. You came from the Midwest. I know a little bit of your story, but why don't you tell everybody else?
Sure. As you alluded to, and as most folks that are listening can probably tell, I'm from the Midwest, or at least not from around here. So I was born and raised in the Midwest. I joined the Ohio Air National Guard in 2000, right out of high school, and I was activated for Operation Iraqi Freedom. In total, I spent about 15 years in the Guard, but about 5.5 of that was active duty with the deployments and exercises. Obviously, it was a busy time for the military in 2000 to 2015. But then I got into healthcare and healthcare administration. And being a veteran, when I was looking for what I wanted to do, working for and with veterans was very important to me. So I started my healthcare career with the VA. I spent about 12, 13 years with the VA. And I kind of had to ask myself a question. Am I a federal employee or am I a healthcare administrator? Those are two different things. And one's not better than the other. It's just different missions, bureaucracy, and the ways that things have to be carried through. And I decided that I wanted to test the private sector waters, and I did. I went into the private sector, as I am still now. My most recent position, I ran 2 acute care specialty hospitals in Indianapolis. We were certified in respiratory failure. So I joined that in September of 19. We were very busy during the pandemic with, upwards of 30 to 40 ventilated patients. I enjoyed that time. I learned a lot. That was a for-profit sector. And I think that there's space in healthcare for for-profit, but that wasn't where my heart was. As I was thinking about it, veterans are where my heart is. I get excited every day to wake up and know that I have the opportunity to make a meaningful impact on thousands of people who have served or have been those family members that have served or those poor parents that lost somebody. That's something I can get excited for. So when I saw this opportunity and I learned more about the organization, Maine became a reality for us. I wouldn't say when I was starting to look that Maine was on the radar for us. However, God works in mysterious ways and has plans for all of us. Ours ended up with a permanent vacation here in Maine for a while. Just couldn't be happier to be part of this organization. We're still embracing Maine. I've been here since December. My family just got here 2 months ago. We're moving into the house and schools and football and all the things that we have to do just in a brand new state and new section of the country.
I'm sure they'll be excited about winter coming.
I think it was a little bit of strategy to get them up here in the summer.
Yeah.
I was here in December, so I kind of got the heart of it. And it's not too dissimilar from the Midwest. The only thing that gets me is the sun going down at 4:30 in the afternoon. That's hard to get used to.
Indeed.
Well, you certainly can't beat the summers in Maine.
No.
Or fall.
And that's
fall.
What everyone has told me, that the summers, the falls make the winters worth it. And we've just had our first guests from out of town over the past couple of weeks, and then they've had a great time and enjoyed it. We're doing our best, but like I said, we've got 2 boys, one's in high school, one's in middle school. So that's a lot of our time right now. But hopefully once football season settles down a little bit, we'll get a little more time out there. And I grew up skiing on a little hill. It was about 500 foot was the elevation on it in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So I'm excited to get my kids out on some real runs and let them see what snow sports are like.
Oh, yeah. Well, welcome to Maine. There's so much to see. You're going to really love it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll love the coast. Obviously, there's no coast in Indiana.
Absolutely. They love the coast. I think the biggest disappointment was because they would come visit me on their breaks while they were out from school. I had to explain to them that we don't do lobster rolls for lunch and whole lobsters for dinner every night. That's just a special thing.
That's awesome.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Corenna Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk. And we are having a discussion with Maine Veterans Homes CEO, Brad Klawitter. Well, thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I do appreciate it.
I appreciate the support.
So how many people do you have for staffing?
We have about 1,200 individuals, about 1,100 FTE, and those are all types of skills, from registered nurses, CNAs, dietary folks, housekeeping. It's a full operation that we have to have an entire support team behind. So we have about 1,200 folks spread throughout the state. We actually contribute about $65 million in payroll to the state. So we're not a huge employer, but significant. In some of the places we are, some of our more rural areas like Caribou, Machias, there may not be other options for folks to work in healthcare other than our facilities. We've seen nursing homes in the state of Maine close 4 times the national rate of closures. And a lot of that has to do with the funding sources and the exuberant cost of care and how it went up so exponentially during the pandemic.
So how are you guys holding up with all these extra costs?
Well, we're doing the best we can, is the best I can say. We are currently operating at a loss. We have been for the past 4 years. And the main way we've been able to weather that is we have been thankful that we've received one-time funding from the state and other sources. We have had to draw down. We had a capital investment fund that we would use for projects like our new Augusta home in order to contribute our capital amount to that, and then regular capital planning like any large organization would have. But we've had to pull from that. We've pulled over half of those resources out just to maintain our operations. Some years we were running $16, $17, $21 million behind. And it's not unique to us because it really comes down to a MaineCare issue and that the rates just aren't sustainable. I think it's hard for folks that don't have the mandates and the added expenses that state veterans homes have. But then when you look at that, we can quantify $2.7 million in operational cost that we have to absorb just because we are a state veterans home. That makes that delta even wider for us, the cost of care versus the reimbursement.
You hear out there a lot of times that MaineCare is not paying some of the hospitals. Are they paying you in good timing or not?
Yes, for the most part. Yeah. We have not been affected when the supplemental was going through. I hope that MaineCare and DHHS realizes how razor thin the long-term care industry's margins are, and that just a month or two in holding those payments could be critical to some nursing homes that are really on the edge. We have received that support, but it's just that cost keeps going up. Labor is not getting any cheaper. Supply chain is not getting any cheaper. I would argue it's getting more expensive. We haven't had too much of the international trade impact us, but a lot of our suppliers are starting to talk to us about that. So between what we were already dealing with and then some of the uncertainty in the international markets in terms of trade, we just expect that those costs will continue to go up.
Speaking of that, can you explain LD 182 and how that is affecting you?
I'd be happy to explain it. Bangor's own Representative Supika is the sponsor of this bill, and the title of it is an act to require DHHS to establish MaineCare reimbursement rates for MVH on a per resident basis. What does that mean? We're asking MaineCare to make up the delta. When you take all of our bed days of care with all of the services that we provide, when it comes to MaineCare, our cost of care is about $100 higher than what our MaineCare reimbursement is. So what this would do is on a monthly or regular basis, it would make up that difference for us so that we would at least break even on the largest number of payer source that we have through MaineCare. It's a critical bill for us. Like I said, I've been very grateful that we've been able to get one-time funding. But really for us to focus on the future of Maine Veterans Homes, we have to know that we have a future ahead of us. And that's why we're asking for this bill, which would put into the governor's budget a line item specifically for Maine Veterans Homes to make up that difference. We wouldn't have to go back to the legislature every year to try to get one-time funding and all the effort that goes into that. And I think that we would be able to utilize a lot of time that we spend doing that on other projects, such as we have such a great mission. If you haven't been into one of our homes, I invite anyone to come see what we have. It's not what you think of when you think of a long-term care facility. The activities, the events, everything that we do. We had the Patriot Riders at, I think it was our Bangor home recently, and we're out there with lifts getting residents into the sidecar of a buggy, of a motorcycle buggy, or those spider cars, the three-wheel. We're putting our residents in there. We have such great community support of folks coming in, but what we don't have is the philanthropy support. You know, I'd love to be able to focus on things that we can do to lessen that delta, and hopefully the expense to the taxpayer wouldn't be as high as it is now. If I can get that delta down to $50 per resident per day, that would be a great difference for us.
If we didn't have all these homes and these 600 vets, where would they have gone?
That's a question that we really can't answer. Just recently up north, there was a facility, not a veterans home, but a regular community nursing home that had to shut down because of the financial constraints. And it took months for them to be able to discharge the residents that were living there. At one point, when they started planning for this, they called everywhere. There were 7 staffed beds in the entire state of Maine for 50-something residents. We serve about 1,200 folks a year, so I don't know where that capacity is. It's certainly not in this community. The sad part of the example that I just gave you from that nursing home in the northern part of the state is some of the residents had to be placed 3, 4, 5 hours away from the community that they grew up in, that they lived in, that they're able to have visitors come to. Once you're 3, 4 hours away, the number of visitors that you're going to have is very limited. there's good evidence to show that that support structure is required for folks to thrive in a long-term care. So I think about some of our facilities like in Caribou or in Machias, where if we didn't have the facility in Caribou, a veteran in Aroostook County might have to travel down to here 3 hours, 3.5, that I've learned making this drive multiple times now, going up to Caribou. It's very inconvenient for families to have to do that. It's a large expense, and the person that suffers is the resident, the one that's in the actual home.
It's unnecessary stress on the entire family.
It is. The one thing that we really haven't solved, well, I shouldn't say the one thing, we haven't solved a lot of things in healthcare in this country, but aging is a major issue in America. We are looking at the gray tsunami. We're just at the front waves of the baby boomer generation starting to age and needing our types of services. That's going to be a huge number of people that are coming into what we call our age group, where we're more likely to see folks. It's added stress to the family members of how am I going to do this? The average woman now will spend more time caring for parents than they will children. And that's while trying to work another job, get their kids to school, and all the other stressors that come with life. You try to add once a week and to see dad 3.5 hours away. That's the first thing that's going to get cut.
Well, I have visited Maine Veterans Home in Bangor. I've attended an event there before, and it's just such a wonderful facility.
The quality of Maine Veterans Homes is the one thing that, again, I shouldn't say the one thing. I keep using singularities when I shouldn't. The activities and what we're able to do and the commitment of our staff. When I've been at the homes and we've done some of these anniversaries, there are people that have been in the building as long as the building has existed. I call them the cornerstone, both because they helped lay it and, they've been there for so long at our organizations. You don't see that type of consistency. And when I walk around and I'm on the units and I'm talking to the veterans and I'm talking to the staff, I always ask the staff members, what keeps you here? And without exception, I will use a singularity here. It's the veterans, the residents. So I've never been in an organization, I've been in good organizations where that is the mission is the number one answer that continuously comes up. I'm here for the veterans. I'm here for my residents. And they take that personal. You'll hear them say, these are my residents. And at the same time, when a resident passes, we have a very solemn ceremony. That includes other residents that are there acting as an honor guard. And then we line the walls.
Wow.
When you watch the deceased veteran being taken, you'll see our staff in as much distress as you'll see some of the family members because they have that strong of a relationship with them. You always see at the end of it where the family and the caregivers are hugging each other and just exchanging what it meant. And that goes on, without exception, 20, 30 minutes after the veteran leaves.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Corenna Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk. We are having a discussion with Maine Veterans Homes CEO, Brad Klawitter.
Obviously, Maine is the oldest state in the country, so I'm sure your numbers are going to go up with people getting older. Is there any plans to expand at all, or are you still waiting for the funding? Obviously, when you're talking to the legislature, and if you're explaining it to us as you are to them, I would have to think they're in agreement that we got to find some money somewhere to keep this going.
They are, and I'll get to your question about expansion, but I think it's important to note when we talk about LD 182, that bill is tabled right now, so it'll still be active when the January short session opens. We still have an opportunity for that. One of the benefits, if 182 was to pass, we're asking for $5.6 million from the state, thereabouts. That would bring in matching funds. I know everyone's heard about the Medicaid cuts that are impending in 2027. Institutions like ours will not be cut from the FMAP processes, which is how they double the money. So a $5.7 million investment will turn into about $11 million once the federal match happens. But the other part that's important to consider is about 25% of our residents come to us as 70% service-disabled veterans who then are eligible for the VA to pay for their care as well as a stipend. If not for us being able to take those 70% service-disabled veterans, most of those veterans would be on MaineCare and still require the same level of care at a cost of $20 million. So not only are we able to bring in funds from the federal government match, and we'll be able to continue to do that, we actually save MaineCare by being open and operational.
There are several legislators that actually listen to this podcast. Let's hear your floor speech as to why this needs to pass LD 182.
My floor speech would be America and the state of Maine makes contracts with veterans. I'm a disabled veteran myself. We understand that when we sign that dotted line, that we could give life, limb, and in service to the country, and we accept that. But part of us accepting that is that we're going to be taken care of when we come back, because there's significant issues. The comorbidities that veterans suffer compared to the general population and some of the diseases that they face at a higher incident, veterans expect that they're going to be taken care of. And when we're looking at possible changes to what we're able to offer at Maine Veterans Homes, we're not honoring that contract. Or as the Maine legislature put it in 1977, the moral obligation that we have to our veterans. Now, I understand it's difficult in that there's only limited money. We were able to pass the committee 9 votes to 0. We passed on a roll call vote in the House 143 to 0 and consent calendar from the Senate. So we didn't receive one no vote through the entire process. But what I don't think most people realize is that it then has to go through an appropriations process. So just because you're able to get it to pass committee and House and Senate doesn't mean that it's going to get funded. And that's where we haven't been able to get this to the finish line in the past, is at that appropriations table. Usually we get tabled and it's not up for consideration. Now, that doesn't mean that the appropriations committee are bad people. I don't want to cast it by them not passing this or voting to include this, that they're anti-veteran, anti-American, anything like that. They've got a very hard task. They were given about $12 million once the budget was passed to fulfill over $2 billion worth of requests. And we're just one of them. Personally, it's a deep commitment to me. So I argue that our veterans are worth that commitment. But I also understand from their standpoint where it's very difficult to serve all needs.
To add to that floor speech, we also have hospitals closing, we have birthing centers closing. I'm sure folks clearly wouldn't want Maine Veterans Homes to close. As you stated, you serve 1,200 a year, and there are Maine veterans, right? So we want to take care of them.
And something I'll add to that real quick that people don't realize, yes, we're the oldest by age, but we're also the 3rd highest per capita veterans in the entire union. So there's a large number of veterans that live in this state. I mean, when you look at counties, projections and that, it's not uncommon to see 12, 13, 14% of a county are veterans. So there are a lot of veterans in Maine, and especially veterans that are reaching that 65 plus age that really is going to impact us. I use 65 because that's kind of the cohort where we start seeing minimal usage of our services. Obviously, as you get into your 70s and your 80s, you're more likely, but we generally gauge population shift and planning on that 65 plus when we're in the long-term care industry.
So in the event that for some reason the money is not appropriated, do you have a plan B?
I would say that I have plan B regardless of whether or not the legislation passes and is funded, because we can help ourselves here. We have a tradition that we've operated very independently in our homes, and that includes things like our purchasing and different practices. So we're looking at ways that we can save. I'll give one example. Our prime medical supply vendor. We had several of them at all of our different homes. Now we've consolidated that into one vendor, which is going to save us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've implemented things in our pharmacy programs that is saving us $700,000. We're doing what we can to make sure that our house is clean. I don't want to go to the state. I don't want to go to taxpayers asking for money, and we're not doing our part as well. In addition, we've had some key leadership changes throughout the entire organization. Myself is one of them. I feel that we've got the right people in the right place for the changes that we have to make, and this team's very excited to start that. So far, we've been able to identify $1.5 million in savings just in the past 6 months, and we're going to continue in that process. We're also looking at things like expanding different types of care. Most people wouldn't realize that we run 2 pharmacy programs. One serves our homes, the 6 Maine Veterans Homes. Our external one serves 15 community homes, so that's an extra revenue stream. And we're continuing to look at what type of revenue streams can we have that supports the needs, especially in rural counties where we're present, but also helps us in terms of meeting our financial obligations. And another way that we were trying to change that is when the pandemic hit, a lot of normal operational things or strategic things stopped, just ceased in full. And one of those things was philanthropy. Most people were struggling during the pandemic. You saw giving going down throughout charities, but we're a 501(c)(3). Again, we're not ran by the state. We're not ran by the VA. We are a 501(c)(3). we have not taken advantage of the great story that we have, that we can tell in order to get donations to help us. That's a major initiative that we just started about 3 months ago. Obviously, anything like that takes months and months and months. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to build a sustainable philanthropy program so that we can draw from those extra dollars that we need for operations, or if we have a capital project that we're trying to get funded.
Thank you for listening to Part 1 with Maine Veterans Homes CEO Brad Klawitter. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, Sunday, November 9th at 6:30 a.m. on VOM, The Voice of Maine.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. The most important voices aren't always the loudest ones. They're the voices of everyday people, raising families, running businesses, serving their towns. That's who we want to hear from. Share your ideas with us online, and let's make sure those voices are never left out. Find us on Facebook or on X or at qpointpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.